So welcome to ODinLA, February 28th, 2022, to Talent Analytics, what OD and talent professionals need to know. I'm excited to have Iman and Guyana and Nancy here to talk about your experiences in the talent analytics space, either as somebody who produces analytics and is an analytics specialist, or who consumes analytics and collaborates with analytics folks and can talk about what it's like being on the client end. And I'm going to introduce you briefly with probably less information than is in the ODinLA invitation, to keep it brief. So Guyana has a PhD from Alliant International University, where I'm on the faculty, and Iman is in the middle of the dissertation process. And Guyana is principal analyst at Medtronic, the global medical device company, and she serves as an internal data consultant who helps clients on the business side and in HR and HR business partners, et cetera. And as part of her role, she delivers insights and recommendations through data consulting and research focused on talent strategies, both aligned with HR and with business priorities, so that people can make data-enabled decisions. And you'll hear a lot about data-driven decisions this evening, because that's what this evening is all about. At the GOAT Group, leading marketplace for authentic sneakers, apparels, and accessories globally, an organization that probably fewer people have heard about, but lots of people are going to be hearing about because it's growing a lot. Iman Hardaway has a master's and degree and is a senior associate in people strategy and programs at GOAT Group, and that means someone who is on the HR side, a client of analytics. And in her role, she designs and implements high-impact people programs, manages strategic projects across this rapidly scaling global workforce, and partners in cross-functional teams across the business to enable data-driven performance. Nancy Tatt, also at GOAT Group, is senior analytics analyst, and in her role, she focuses on anchoring any people-related decisions in decision-making in data. She supports everything from recruiting to performance management metrics. She delivers data-driven insights on the entire employee life cycle, and does this for business leaders as well as, of course, people in HR and other key stakeholders to maximize talent in a rapidly growing global workforce. So today, what you're going to be hearing is answers to some questions that people in OD and talent have been asking. People want to know things like, what can OD talent development and talent management professionals achieve using talent analytics? And that'll be the first question we start with. And I want to give people an opportunity, if there needs to be a follow-on question or you need a little bit of clarification, to hit the hand raise so that you pop up and I'll be able to see you, and I'll call on you when there's a gap that gives an appropriate opportunity for you to ask your clarifying question. Or if you're in analytics and you have something that you want to add, you can raise your hand and do so. And then after 20 minutes or so, we'll present you with a case that you'll go into breakout groups to read and answer some questions on. So Nancy, Guyana, Iman, what can OD talent development and talent management professionals achieve using analytics, talent analytics in particular?
I can answer that. So I guess there's, in terms of talent analytics, there's a pretty wide variety of what that means in terms of talent analytics. And I think essentially it's so that you can kind of move away from like just solely anecdotal stories and gut feelings and things like that, and really kind of root it in the data piece of it. So in anything people related, whether it's rolling out certain programs, decision making for your team in terms of like hiring, bandwidth, all of that can kind of be rooted using analytics or using the people data that you have in place.
Great.
Okay, Anna, do you have anything to add to that?
Sorry, keep putting myself on mute and then taking it off. No, I think you did a really good job summarizing it. I feel like where we are right now in data and analytics is an interesting point, because I feel like at least the organization that I'm at, we use talent analytics to kind of understand our past and hopefully be able to predict our future. And we're at this pivotal point, like I mentioned, where we have, a good solid foundation to build from. And then hopefully one day talent analytics can be used to help our managers and our, other populations make decisions.
Yeah. And I'll just add, in my past experiences, I tend to either work with analytics teams that were outside of my specific HR team. But, in my current role, I'm able to partner with our analytics side. And in my particular team, it actually is made up with analysts and also project managers, which is my role. And so I get to partner with Nancy across different programs, such as our engagement surveys, or partnering with our other analysts in creating recruiting analytics, and working with our HRBPs, working with our L&D leaders on our team, and creating, using the engagement surveys as baseline in developing our manager enablement programs. It's so many different avenues that we're able to really leverage the possibility of analytics, and really leverage and encourage our stakeholders and our clients and really the business to start making those data-driven decisions.
Do you want to give some examples of situations where talent analytics provides a lot of benefit? Even if some of those situations are like, well, that's kind of obvious to you, it may not be as obvious to people who haven't had a lot of experience using analytics.
Yeah, I think right off the bat, starting off from kind of like it's a journey, right? So I think that with every company that kind of incorporates and starts to adopt talent analytics or people analytics, whatever you want to coin it, I think it's you kind of have a crawl, walk, run phased approach in how you incorporate analytics in your business, right? So I think that in the very first stage, it can be from simple, basic reporting, and it's really just descriptive reporting in terms of understanding your current workforce. So as basic as just looking at headcount, looking at attrition, looking at terminations, that's typically where organizations like to start in terms of digesting the data that they even have from a people perspective, all the way to areas that Guyana has touched on in terms of like forecasting, predicting, all of that, using those historical trends that you kind of measure throughout that life cycle of an employee in whatever area you want to measure, to kind of anticipate trends and to anticipate changes in the business, and kind of pivot to where you can meet the needs to anticipate those trends. Because if you anticipate like changes in the business, and you know that your workforce is changing, then you need to adjust by hiring, whatever that is, to accommodate. You can see all of that in the data, right? So I think that it's kind of a journey in terms of where you are in the maturity of talent analytics at your organization. But just as like an easy example of measuring headcount and understanding the distribution of the different types of employees that you have in your workforce, and the different breakouts from that, from all the different demographics that you have at the employee level, that gives a lot of insight to what your workforce even looks like today.
Would it be the case that you could look, let's say on the business strategy side, they say we need to amp up our game in e-commerce. We're going to need to provide the following kinds of services. Right now, we provide those kinds of services to a few million people a year, and we're going to be growing to a consumer base of 100 million people a year. We're going to have to hire software engineers who, and then they start to describe that, and then you could ask, and how many of those software engineers, how many are being pumped out of the software engineering schools, how many people, and so on, and start to take a look at the competitors who are also hiring from that pool and start to see start to guess where you're going to have to rise to the occasion to be able to bring in a large number of really talented software engineers or whatever the challenge happens to be. Can you use analytics and predictive analytics to guess that far out, like a year, 2 years, 5 years, to do workforce planning and use the analytics that way? Or is that a organizational maturity issue? Organizations have to get there first.
At least for our side, yeah, that's definitely the case. Having all of those different data points in place and making sure that the data is clean is definitely kind of the first phase in measuring and anticipating those hiring needs. With that, in terms of whatever your hire is, if you're looking to hire we need an X number of software engineers, we need X number of warehouse employees, whatever the business kind of anecdotally feels like they need, you can kind of measure it based on output. And similar for in our environment, for at least, we have like the warehouse population, and given the order volume and the trends that we kind of see in terms of the seasonality of our business, you can kind of anticipate how many people do we need to be at the warehouses, fulfilling orders, authenticating our shoes, all of that, and all of that changes based on the different seasons that impact our business. So our business is greatly impacted by that. When you're buying shoes, when you're buying clothes, whatever it is from our app, then you know that fluctuates with the holidays and whatever the case may be. So in looking at the order volume and all of that, understanding how long does it take for us to accommodate that need for our workforce so that we're able to support our business. All of those different data points have to be clean in the pipeline for us to forecast when we're going to have those people in place. So for example, in terms of time to hire, those kind of metrics, if you think that there's 10 fulfillment associates that need to be hired into our warehouses to fulfill those orders, how long does it take in terms of the right person applying for the job all the way to when they are actually in our warehouse and I'm working? What is that days to fill kind of metric that allows us to back into when we need to start aggressively hiring? So arbitrarily, for example, if it takes 3 weeks for us to hire a fulfillment associate, we know that if we have to hire 10 fulfillment associates by the holidays, we need to start actively interviewing earlier than by 3 weeks in advance to make sure that we're getting the right people into our warehouses to meet that holiday demand.
And just adding on to that, I think that's why it's so valuable, because we can meet with our business leaders weekly and share with them these dashboards of looking at each warehouse location, each location we have, and what those projected headcount numbers will be, and really be able to work with, and then have our recruiters on the call to really work with them to see, okay, how long will it take us to fill this headcount for this particular location that's coming up in 2 to 3 months or in the next month. So having those dashboards created and having those that projected headcount, working with our talent analytics leads, with our business leaders and the recruiters all together, it really it really shows the value. And me, from like the onboarding perspective, I'm able to meet with them weekly so that we can make sure that our recruitment team is prepared with the right amount of days to really make sure that we fill those hiring needs, and then also that our onboarding teams are prepared so that when those candidates are in the queue, we're able to onboard them on time so that they can start at that warehouse. So it's really a full process where we're able to utilize those analytics to really back into starting our employees and starting them in the timely manner, especially in times like the seasonal hires that we just left.
Thank you. Diana and Nancy, OD people want to know, where do you get your data? What data sources do you use? And really, OD professionals before this event came up with 3 different questions. Where do the numbers come from? And people should remember it's not just numbers, there's also qualitative data that's highly valuable. What do you measure and how do you use those metrics? And what purposes, for different purposes, what models do you use? Like, for instance, do you use the 9-box for talent planning? So if you want to answer all 3 together, or just start with where did the numbers come from, and then go into what do you measure and how do you use it?
I can kind of do a quick overview of each of the 3. So where do our numbers come from? We mainly get our data from Workday. So that's the platform that we use. So when an employee is hired, they fill out, certain demographics about them. Their performance reviews are included in there. And then we are able to generate reports out of Workday, like let's say an active listing where I have an employee's name, gender, ethnicity, are they up for a promotion? How did they do on their year-end performance review, et cetera. So all of our data originally comes from Workday, and then from Workday, it's uploaded into a dashboard, which the ones that we use are called Tableau, where we're able to provide visuals for our executive committee, and that's who I provide my scorecards to. So my scorecards are based on those visuals from Tableau. I include them in a deck, and then I provide the insights as part of my data consulting. So next question, what do we measure? Typically, we measure a couple of things. So these things are on a quarterly basis, as I mentioned. The first one is headcount. I take a look at any sort of factors that impact headcount, which include hires, promotions, and terminations. So seeing, based on those kind of 3 levers, where are we landing on headcount? We also look at representation of our workforce. So this would be like gender, ethnicity, age, et cetera. And we also lastly use an org health survey. So that's like an employee satisfaction survey, if you will. We do that twice a year. And that the factors that we get from there include things like engagement, inclusion, innovation, as well as others, of course. And in addition to all of that, we also do any sort of data that's part of our yearly annual HR processes. So like goal setting for performance reviews and things like org and talent planning. And I believe any sort of like workforce planning that we do that usually happens every maybe 3 to 5 years. We pull data based on those different categories as well. And then the last question, models. I wouldn't say we technically use models. We basically, the way that we look at data is we're either measuring our progress on a goal or like I mentioned, those quarterly scorecards, we just see how we're tracking either against ourselves or like my clients or the functions. I would let the functions know how they're tracking against our baseline, which is Medtronic overall or our total organization. That's kind of how we use models.
Great, thank you. Nancy,
yeah, for us,
if there's anything different or unique to add.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's all very similar. It's just different systems and different tools that we have in place, but essentially measuring the exact same thing in terms of headcount, representation of the workforce, performance management, engagement, attrition. All of those are pretty in line with what Guyana had mentioned as well. From a systems perspective, where we get our data from, in my past life, I've also worked in Workday. So Workday had our applicant tracking system, our human capital management system, performance management, succession planning with Ninebox, and I think that's it. And then now, currently at Go, we're using UltiPro or UKG. So that's where our human capital management data comes from. In terms of our applicant tracking system, we're using Lever. In terms of our engagement surveys, we're using Culture Amp. And same thing with performance management. We're also using Culture Amp. So all of those different data points come from currently very disparate systems. Ideally, you would like to be able to kind of aggregate it all to a centralized place, similar to like a Tableau or a Power BI or anything like that. But currently for us, we're still kind of easing into the analytics journey. And I think that as our organization grows, there's a greater demand for it since we are growing so rapidly. But currently we are aggregating all of that into Google Sheets. So very manual for right now, but ideally we are going to be moving to a data visualization tool to be able to incorporate all of these different systems so that they can all be in one place.
Yeah. Pam Hartman put in a question. How do you reconcile the data from all those different systems? This is an issue in IT everywhere.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's definitely been a pain point for us. And I think that that's definitely something that I've experienced in the past that's been challenging is you often hear kind of like garbage in, garbage out, right? That's what you hear in analytics is if the data is not clean going in, it's not going to be clean coming out. So ideally, if we have kind of one, I guess, data point to reference to for all the different systems, that's how we can kind of reconcile all of the data together. So what we're using is like employee ID. That's that unique identifier for everyone so that it can kind of compare apples to apples for each system. And then from a candidate perspective, that obviously differs. That's a different point in the life cycle. But once they are an actual employee, that's a source of reference.
Mm-hmm. And there's not only garbage, but there are often things that are perfectly clean for one database that is just simply not a match for the information coming from another database because they have fields that measure things that are close, but they're not the same thing.
Yep.
So now I'm going to get another question. Gaina was saying that Medtronic has a separate HR data infrastructure team that handles this. There's always a question, is it the analytics function or the talent management department responsible for this? Or are there folks who are experts in IT and let them handle the especially automated putting the data together in a seamless way? That it's nice when you've got experts to handle all that for you.
Very nice.
What Stacy was asking, which department is responsible for keeping the data entered and accurate? And I think the answer to that is it depends on the organization, but let's hear how it's done with you.
For me at Go currently, it has definitely varied in all the organizations I've been a part of. Typically, the kind of first point of contact in updating the data will probably be someone on the talent acquisition team. They're the one bringing the candidates in. They're the one sourcing the candidates. So they're kind of the first point in contact in terms of data entry. And then from there, you also have additional coordinators on the people team or the HR team to migrate them over to our HCM systems or HRIS systems once they become an actual employee. So we have an HRIS team that handles that to ensure their data is updated. And then on the analytics side, we're almost kind of like consumers of the data. I've been in organizations where it kind of is, you're operating as both. So I work very closely with the HRIS team to make sure data is inputted correctly and cleanly. So we work through many audits together. But for our teams, it's separate. So we also have those experts similar to Guyana's team that manage that.
And for people who are wondering, what did she just say? HRIS is Human Resources Information Systems, and HCM is Human Capital Management, meaning software that captures people data. And I didn't even realize that HCM systems are seen as different from HRIS. And we use UKG, we enter data as employees can enter your own data for certain things, and then it's in the system. And this is the first time I've heard that UKG is considered human capital management. So I think that I'm saying this because you'll hear different terms for the same software package, and there might be reasons to call it one versus the other. I don't know that we want to get into that, but just to know that those are software packages that deal with human data. So I'm looking what people are saying. So Jennifer Tsai asks, how much programming or coding skill do you need to have to efficiently do your job? Most data analyst job postings I see want or require R or C++ or Python. What are the typical needs in the human capital data analysis, talent analytics sort of positions?
I provided my response because I feel like I don't necessarily do any sort of coding. I would say I do really basic things, and it's more for visualization purposes because our data is pretty well coded. All I really have to do is just create any sort of custom reports for my clients.
So that's why you're using SPSS to do some really simple and descriptive analytics. Maybe if you're lucky, you get data that predicts something else and you do a multiple regression. Power BI and Tableau, which is for queries, analyses, and visualization of the findings. So as Guyana, you noted, pretty basic. Is there anything else to add on this? Because if not, I want to ask you questions for some brief answers about situations. So I'm going to move on. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, yep, that's fine.
Yeah. So what situations arise where OD, talent development, and talent management professionals don't use analytics at all, or they use them inadequately, and they leave a lot of value on the table? You know what value they leave. They have no idea. It's in their blind spot. Help fill in their blind spots. What should they know?
I can start for this one. A couple of areas that come to mind. So something that it's unfortunate because, you know, if we had more time, we'd be able to do this, but mainly a lot of our analysis focuses on either senior director and above. So maybe like the director and VP population, any sort of like double clicking into the data just because, you know, there's so many employees and just based on the strategy. But it would have been nice to be able to track different pools of talent. So let's say if we wanted to take a look at early career and do like a double click into how is our early career talent planning doing, because, you know, a certain portion of the population will most likely retire. We need to start thinking about succession, and we don't necessarily provide any sort of like dedicated resources to early career talent. Another metric that it would be nice is to do any sort of like risk retention mitigation. So taking a look and identifying certain factors that could potentially lead an employee to want to voluntarily terminate. Being able to understand, you know, what those factors are and be able to track them a little bit better would be nice. And any sort of progress from our development programs. I feel like there's a missed opportunity there. Employees go through these programs and we don't necessarily track how they're doing afterwards or what their career paths look like. So those are a couple areas that come to mind.
So like, for instance, training and development programs will have the happy sheet valuations afterwards. who cares whether they like the coffee in the hotel room? What matters is, and what results happened afterwards. Did
Exactly.
morale go up? Did productivity go up? Did people use those people skills they got trained in? And did their direct reports say, hey, I'm getting coached a lot more often, I'm more productive because of it? And those kinds of things. That, I think, is value that we've been leaving on the table for eons. And what else is, Iman, you look like you had something to add there.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, we started doing that, of just utilizing the engagement surveys in our manager enablement, our learning development program. So using the engagement survey questions to create like those baselines, so that we're able to see the trends as they go through the program, see trends over time of those individuals who are in the program, of if their engagement levels have changed over time, and also to see the impact of their direct reports and if that has trended over time. I think that's something that can be utilized across different organizations, but it is oftentimes left off the table. And as they're creating these programs, it's almost thought of after the fact instead of really baking that in before the program even launches.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So that's a really great segue into the case study that Nancy and Iman put together, so that we can go into breakout groups and start practicing thinking about these things. We're going to give you some pretend data, results from an employee engagement survey, and ask you to take a look at it and start thinking, okay, I know a little bit about red flags that are here. What else do I need to find out in order to diagnose this situation effectively enough to know what OD or other talent intervention to implement in this situation? So Stacy has put the case study into chat, and it should be easy for you to download. And she's going to put all of us, except for all of you actually, except for the panelists, into breakout group discussions. And you're going to select a note taker, read the case, answer the case questions. You'll get 15 minutes for that. And the questions are, what do you know so far? And what don't you know that you need to in order to do a good diagnosis? What other metrics could you use to assist in your diagnoses, and so on. And you're going to have one person facilitating, unless you can do group facilitation well, which a lot of people can. And then you're going to want one person to be typing in notes and then keeping a summary, because you're going to put those summaries, when you're done with your breakout groups, into chat. And when I say click send, everybody will click send, and then we'll get to see everybody's chat results in what we call Chatterfall. So can everybody see the questions in chat that Stacy Gardner, our technologist for the evening, thank you very much, put together? So copy and paste those just in case they disappear from view, but they should be viewable when you're in your breakout group. And make sure to download the case right now from chat.
Yeah, so I think with similar to like what you mentioned about all the additional avenues that you can kind of look down and how that can lead to action planning, along with even from there, interventions to address a potential issue. I think the engagement survey is kind of like the first point to really hear directly from the employees what they're experiencing and what the pain points are, and that can kind of lead down another avenue or area that we can use analytics to explore even further. So similar to like what everyone was saying about, it's clear that marketing and operations, it seems like their engagement is a little bit lower than the rest of the organization, right? That's kind of the takeaway in terms of the results. From there, what can we do about that? Anecdotally, the comments, what is it telling us? And then how does that compare from the engagement results perspective, since marketing and operations is slightly lower, what about the other factors or topics that we are also surveying against? So like leadership communication, the attrition rate, and how does marketing and operations fare against the rest of the organization as well? Similar to like what Iman was saying about having the HRBPs kind of be that point of contact for us for additional context. We just have solely, as an analyst, we just kind of have solely the data in front of us. We don't hear anecdotally on the ground floor what's going on with the business, as well as the seasonality of the business, right? So in terms of engagement and attrition, from the operations and marketing perspective, we know that those are kind of two areas that have been impacted the most by migrating into a remote workforce, as you can see with some of the feedback and the engagement results. In terms of the culture of that business and those sides of the business, what do we know about that? And that's some context that HRBPs can give us. So like with marketing, it's typically more of a creative audience. They typically like to work in person and be able to kind of interact with each other face to face to share those thoughts and work on their projects together from like a creative outlook, right? From like an operations perspective, in terms of the actual business, they may feel a little bit disconnected from the business. Everyone has moved to a remote workforce. Everyone's working from home, and they're working in the warehouses, which is even, you can argue, can even feel more excluded as opposed to those that are working in the corporate setting, because they're all interacting together. They can go into the break rooms, have those water cooler conversations, things like that. So in your experiences, has like a operations or like the warehouse staff have felt a little bit more excluded than and less integrated with the rest of the business. And I'm sure that's exacerbated by moving to a remote workforce, and they feel even more disconnected because they're still in the warehouse and they aren't able to interact with the rest of the business. So those are kind of the key themes that you can kind of feel and hear about when you have the next follow-ups with the HRBPs, as well as other metrics that you can eventually incorporate in response to that lower engagement percentage for marketing and operations.
Are there any other things that you've seen in the comments that you want to point out because they're good practices for people to repeat on different projects? Like, for instance, are the comments grouped by departments? That's a really important thing to check into, because those comments will act like those focus groups. So you don't have to do focus groups, or the comments perplex you, so you have to do a focus group to figure out what's going on there. I once worked on an employee survey project where there was really just like a question here and a question there that fell through the floor for certain departments. And it's like, okay, so what about this question is such a differentiator? What's going on here? And the only way to go after that was to do interviews or focus groups. So what a couple of groups, or at least one group, noted, can we drill deeper? And that is a really good thing, because you can't get answers to questions like that without drilling deeper. So what are some other things that you see here that
I want to point out one of the things I've seen, someone asked for, Nelly actually, a breakdown of the information. She noted tenure. And tenure has been something that is really good to slice the data so that you can see, is it higher engagement scores for those who've been in the organization for 3 months versus those who've been in the organization for 2+ years, 4+ years? Is it lower engagement for those who just started in the organization? That can lead you to thinking, oh, that this might be an onboarding problem, and that might kind of give you more direction to where some of the grievances or where some of these sentiments might be coming from, and what type of interventions or action planning you can kind of put more of your time into. So if it is, those who are newer in the organization, 3 months or less, or 6 months or less, and showing lower engagement scores, then that might mean that particular department might need to invest more time, efforts into their onboarding time frame. It might be something from the people team we need to invest in, but then also from the department perspective, maybe dedicating more time for those employees when they're newly onboarding and creating a system, maybe creating a new hire buddy or so on. So that one piece of data can lead you to some of these different actions and provide insight, valuable insight.
Great.
A comment that I noticed, I believe it's Jennifer's team, they asked what is the turnover rate for marketing and operations, and I think it's good to correlate what you're seeing on like an org health survey to like what the organization's turnover rate is. It's like two different data sources, and given that this is the first survey of its kind, you'd want to double check, is this something that we're noticing happening consistently, or is this like a one-off? In the survey, people said, I'd want to think about leaving, because that does sometimes happen. I've noticed there's certain organizations where they have really high, probability of people saying, I'm thinking about leaving the organization. And then I look at their turnover rate and it's like one of the lowest across, our organization. So something else to consider. Great,
thank you. And by the way, if you see notes from Jennifer, Jenny, or Jennifer, the identifying the name of the note taker in this case doesn't differentiate between groups too well. I didn't realize that until I scrolled up. So what are some questions that people have that you'd like to hear about? So people ask things like, is there a performance appraisal system? Is there a learning management system? That's really about the situation itself. And so Nancy, do you want to, for the people who have the specific to the situation questions, do you want to talk about what actually happened? And then I'd like to go into a last phase of questions, which is, and what questions do people have so that they can apply it in their world?
Yeah, so I think that in terms of next steps from this, I think it was very similar to all the questions that everyone had already posed, which was perfect. This often you kind of feel a pain point from the survey. All right, it looks like the survey we're scoring particularly low in these areas. What now? So I think that with all of the questions that have kind of come about, that's kind of the natural thought process of how do we further diagnose what the issue is, and if there truly is an issue. Similar to like what Guyana said, it may just be that these are like one-off situations in terms of attrition, in terms of turnover. Like they mentioned that we want to leave within the next 2 years, but their attrition rate or turnover rate is the lowest in the organization. So having those internal benchmarks as well as external benchmarks to kind of compare against, to kind of give you a better understanding of what the story truly is for each metric, allows you to kind of orient you to which path you need to go down even further. So similar to like the one that was saying about performance, what does performance look like for these folks, for marketing and for operations? What is their promotion rate? What does succession planning look like in those groups? If manager or leadership communication is particularly poor in those areas, how can we look at how the organization and hierarchy is laid out from a workforce planning perspective, to enable the team to work more effectively and communicate more effectively, right? So for example, if like marketing and operations, their hierarchy is kind of built out to where their span of control is very limited, in that a single manager can have maybe 20 plus direct reports, where it makes it more challenging and greater strain on the manager to manage his or her team, while also, doing the work that they need to do. That may be a span of control issue that we need to address. What does it look like in terms of building out their leadership bench to really understand how can we move people around effectively so that they feel like they have the support from their managers and from their teams to feel connected with the company, connected in the work that they do, and feel even more engaged in the work that they do, and therefore potentially lower the attrition rate. So I think that with that, there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of dive into it further, and understanding the workforce spread and the feedback. And that can come even more so with the focus groups, say like the comments were lacking, or that they were not as clear by department. Those focus groups can give you additional insight directly from the employees, while building that trust with the employees and understanding what really is going on here, and how can we as a people team and OD professionals support that.
Nancy, and of course, Iman and Guyana, feel free to chime in. This case is a composite, so it's, not connected to a particular organization, but you've seen situations like this. What's an example of a situation like this where you got this differentiated data at the top level? What did you do to drill down? Well, I guess you kind of addressed that quite well already. What did you do once you had the information where you felt like, okay, this is our diagnosis, or this is the data on which we can do the diagnosis? What did you do then?
Yeah, so it was partnering very closely with the HRBPs as well as the OD team. So that's when Iman really comes in and helps us figure out what are the appropriate intervention methods that we can leverage from here, as well as partnering with the HRBPs as that trusted partner and stakeholder with the business leader to implement those intervention strategies, while maintaining that trust with the leader, as well as having that trust with the rest of their team, in knowing that the action planning and the intervention methods will be carried out timely and effectively.
And can you give an example of a situation where you saw the differences, you investigated, had a diagnosis, decided which interventions are available, and did one or two of them, and what resulted? And to what extent do you use the analytics to track how well you were doing?
Yeah, I'm sure Iman can speak to this a little bit more as well. But for us, what we had done was, after the diagnosis and uncovering what appropriate intervention methods and action planning steps are needed for the leader and the HRBP to help him or her carry out. That can include something as simple as, if it's like a manager development issue, I feel like my manager's not having like the best one-on-ones with me. He or she's not really guiding the conversation. I'm not clear on my goals. Whatever that is, that may be a manager development issue. So with that, we can look into if they have participated in a manager or leadership development program, in terms of the communication, whatever it is. And if so, enroll them in, if not, enroll them in that so that they can participate in it. And then similarly in other low-hanging fruits, what are kind of like the easy or quick wins that we can implement to address a communication issue. That's something that we can also push out with the HRBP, the OD professional, and the leader in terms of improving that cadence and transparency of communication from the business down. So incorporating more coffee chats, one-on-ones, all hands, whatever that is, because we're in a remote setting where you feel like the strain of being disconnected even more. We need to be more intentional in having those conversations with our teams and making sure that everyone feels connected, as well as understanding where the business is going, at least in pertaining to their work, so they feel like they understand how their job aligns to the business. So with that, those constant touch bases, the one-on-ones, all hands, all of that can help improve that in conjunction with manager development training. And then from there, once that's been rolled out, next survey cycle, let's measure again. Let's see how we've improved. We kind of have a benchmark now of what direction we're going in. Iman, is there anything that I missed?
Yeah, and I think just adding on, just to that communication piece, looking at, okay, does it mean instead of having the company-wide all hands, do we need to have all hands at the department level, and really championing those department leaders and to work with their management to create those avenues, those channels of communication. If their employees are saying that they feel disconnected. Okay, so how can we have more ongoing communication channels where they get information directly from what's going on in the business, but then also how can they continue to foster communication within their teams, having more regular team meetings, especially if they're in the warehouse, dedicating that time to take them off the floor and really share those department-specific updates.
I'd like to add, you can sometimes have a very specific sort of intervention that's different from anything you've done because it's tailored to exactly the situation. So we had a client organization where they got employee survey data suggesting that people thought the leaders didn't have a strategic direction. Now, the organization had just put out a strategic plan the year before, so they were shocked. We rolled out the strategic plan. We gave talks on it. What do they mean the leaders don't have a strategic direction? We certainly do have a strategic direction. So we did a few interviews to figure out, well, what does this actually mean? Probably a couple of focus groups to find out that people had no idea what had been rolled out in the newsletter and some announcement at some meeting somewhere. It's just, they've got work to do and weren't paying attention to all that stuff because you can't remember it all. So they had us create a meeting in a box, which is basically the agendas, something for the manager leading the meeting to read or hand out to people, to update people on there's a strategic plan, here's what it looks like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What's your feedback? And the agenda had all the questions in and the goals so that they would know when the meeting's done, how do we know this meeting has been successful? And got feedback from the frontline employees and supervisors and managers on what is our response to this strategic plan? What do we think needs to be done in order for this strategic plan to stop being a document hidden in some file drawer somewhere and rather be a live action-filled document in the real world of work? And people gave their feedback, and it was all summarized, went to the executives. The executives put out these communications. Here's what we heard from you. That was a big shocker for the frontline staff. They actually heard what we said. So that in and of itself was a game changer. And then we heard you say these things. Here are the things we plan to do. And oh, by the way, here are the things that the strategic plan has said. And I want you to notice this thing that happened in the organization and that thing that happened in the organization in the last few months actually came from the strategic plan directly. The next year, there were no changes on the employee survey except one item. The one item about executives having a sense of direction, whereas no other item had a statistically significant difference between last year and this year. That one item jumped 20 points. It was mind-blowing. They had never seen a change like that. The meeting in a box, two-way conversation plus post-meeting communication and action based on it made all the difference in the world. Now people knew what the plan was. They knew the executives had a plan. They knew what the implementation looked like and could recognize, that implementation, that's from the plan. And they gave other feedback that was directly related to their department and its ability to support the strategic plan. And when executives took action on those desiderata, it was a total game changer. That was something the organization had never done before. So it's not like in the HRBP's quiver of arrows. It's not in their toolbox. It's something new and different. So sometimes you invent a totally specialized intervention, and it was an easy intervention too. So I just want to say that so that people don't think that there is this data to analysis to a specific intervention linkage. You can get pretty creative with what interventions you put in play. Are there any other questions about the analytics process, the diagnostic process, how you can help to intervene from anybody who has not yet asked a question?
I have one.
Yeah, Arwin.
Typically organizations try to get a representative sample from the people answering the questions. They succeed or not for a lot of reasons. But in this case in particular, you had 1,500 people giving answers, and then you had 5 people making comments. And I would dare say the comments become the focal point rather than the 1,500 people's feedback. And so how do you balance the trade-off and the weighting of the survey questions from particular comments that people make?
Who would like to address that?
Anybody?
I can add a comment. In the years that we've been doing this, I don't think there's been a case where we've had like a significantly less sample of people doing like a free text option. You'd actually be surprised. Let's say if we got 1,500 responses to the survey, we'd have like 1,300 open text items. And then the problem becomes, how do you actually go through all that data? And typically we use some sort of like natural language processing where it would give us like some sort of like word cloud or anything where it would break out like key themes that come out of the data.
So I'll add something there. Thank you. If you don't have the natural language processing software, then you do a sample, or you do a targeted look at targeted content, only comments about certain things that you know are on the agenda for action. But either way you go, that narrows how many comments you need to analyze. And the number of comments to respondents ratio depends on the type of organization. If you've got a knowledge workers organization, you're not going to get a phrase or a sentence from most people. You're going to get a paragraph or a page. And if you're in an organization with people who are less word-oriented, you may struggle to get a few phrases, or they give you such cryptic phrases, you're not really sure what they said. So it really depends on the organization and the type of occupations that you have in your organization. And these were just samples. They weren't the whole thing. We weren't going to snow you with 1,000 comments. Erwin, did that answer?
Well, I've seen plenty of people briefing a survey and management and the audience will look at the data and they'll talk about the data, and then they'll see one comment and it'll be as if they never saw any of the other surveys. Right. So to me, it's dangerous to use comments paired in the survey, partially for the Guyan's reason is I once asked, give me one word to describe our culture, and I had 2,000 different answers.
Yeah. So there are a couple of things you can do around that. One is facilitate that action planning, interpretation and action planning discussion really well, and emphasize to people that the words are exciting because they're stories. The numbers are not exciting because unless you really dig, you're not going to see the story. But we're going to help you see the story, and then we want you to use the words as just illustrative, and from a few people, and don't disregard them entirely, but take them with a grain of salt. and then help them to do the critical thinking. Otherwise, yeah, they will come up with all sorts of erroneous cognitive biases. The second is do some sampling. Do some very selective sampling of juicy quotes that illustrate what the numbers mean, and leave off the ones that are exciting but tangential to the numbers. And that's a data display skill, task, challenge.
Challenge.
Yeah. I want to thank all the participants with all your questions, your thoughtful review of the case and discussions in the breakout groups. And I want to thank Nancy, Iman, and Gayana for your great answers to people's questions, stories about situations you've been in, insights for the participants here. And I want to give who's announcing the next month's event?
Yes. So for next month's event, we've got focusing on strengths at the company level, lessons learned from Toyota, which our good friend Mike Thompson, who's joined us this evening, will be involved with. So we're looking forward to that. That is on Wednesday, March 23rd at 6 p.m. Set your clocks for that. It is set up to be a virtual event. And then we also have some other events already set up for April and May. Our follow-up to the wellness one that you heard earlier from Ms. Sherry Betts, the inventor of the potato chip, for our April event. And then May, we've got another one on change as well. So lots of exciting stuff. You can always go to meetup.com/ODinLA. That's meetup.com/ODinLA for all the latest and greatest information on events. If you're not a member of ours, it is free to join. We don't charge you anything. So feel free to join us. We also have a Facebook group, or LinkedIn group, sorry, not Facebook, a LinkedIn group for all you fancy pros out there that want to connect. You can search ODinLA. We'd love to have you part of that. There's drop the URL there. So feel free to join us.
Great. And if you scroll up a little, the March meetup registration URL is there. Stacy posted it. It's going to be pretty exciting.
Thank you, Stacy.
I hear Johnny Depp might be there.
Pardon?
Might not. I hear Johnny Depp might be there. He might not, but he might. You never know. If you like Johnny Depp, maybe he'll be there.
Why would he be there?
Why not? Why not? He can be interested in this stuff, right, Mike? Mike?
You never know.
You never know. That's right. You never know. So show up. You never know who you're going to see. That's all I'm saying. You never know.
What's going to be interesting is it's not only about Toyota, a company that everybody wants to know something about. It's also going to be about an intervention that blossomed tremendously and then faded away. Why did it fade away? What can we learn about OD interventions from the upswing, and what can we learn about OD interventions from the downswing? Is it something about the intervention, or is it the historical events of the great financial crisis, or is it something else? It'll be really interesting to hear what the lessons learned are. So I invite everybody to sign up and join us in March. I also want to invite people to stay, if you want to stay for a few minutes, to chat with each other and connect.